Hi, everybody. Welcome to another water webinar with FYLD. I'm really excited today, joined by a very, very special guest, an international friend and cousin from across the pond, Rob Powelson, President and CEO of the NAWC. Rob, thanks for joining. I'm just going to quickly introduce FYLD to those who are new because of your network, and then I'll pass over to you to introduce yourself and your organization. So for those who don't know, FYLD is a work execution platform which puts AI in the hands of field workers. The ultimate goal of that is to enable better decision making at the point of work, boost productivity, and improve safety outcomes for the field workers and run businesses more safely and sustainably. Rob, thanks for joining me today. Really excited to have you. How about you introduce yourself and the organization you work for?
Well, Daniel, thank you. It's always great to be with you and the team at FYLD. You have been one of the key thought leaders, the time I met you at our New England chapter meeting and our NAWC summit, and many of your colleagues. So we thank you for your active engagement in the National Association of Water Companies. I'm here in our boardroom, and you can see over my head here the 130-year anniversary of a nationally respected trade association representing the private regulated water industry here in the United States. We serve over 43 million customers across the U.S. Our top 10 members invest about $5 billion annually in infrastructure enhancements to our drinking and wastewater assets. And we're very proud of our history and our working relationship with a number of key vendors, and we include you, FYLD, as part of that. So it's great to be with you here today.
Great, Rob. Thank you. And that, I think, just puts into scale, for those who can hear my accent, being from the UK, that is the equivalent of serving just under 2/3 of the population of a country, which is, I guess, leads me on to the first question, Rob. Why is the NAWC so instrumental in legislation, but why is it required in the first place? Could you explain to those who may be new to the market why the US water system is so fragmented?
Yeah, well, look, we have a problem in the United States. There's 51,000 drinking water systems, and there's about 15,000 wastewater treatment facilities across the U.S. And I give you that sheer number of 51,000. It's a big number. And what people need to understand is you overlay that against the electric distribution system in the U.S., which has roughly 3,200 electric distribution corporations here in the U.S. and about 1,000 gas LDCs. And so fragmentation is a hindrance to doing things like investment in pipeline infrastructure, meter sets, addressing issues around physical and cybersecurity. And so we have really over 130 years of history been advocates for saying, and I think we're at a tipping point here in the U.S. where that is just not a sustainable model. As you've heard President Trump, I mean, the U.S. is facing a $36 trillion budget deficit. We're spending $2 trillion a year in deficit spending, and it's not sustainable. Well, on the water side, our percentage of federal funds that have come into the water grid here in the U.S. have dropped over 40% since the 1960s. So federal investment in the water grid has basically been on a downward path. And so now more than ever, we're firm believers that private capital and the deployment of that private capital is going to play a huge role in addressing some of the chronic failures in our U.S. water grid.
And presumably that really gives you a platform to leverage your position in the House, both House of Congress and the Senate as well, to drive change in legislation. Is that high on your agenda? And how do you kind of see changes to technology playing a part in legislation moving forward?
Well, I always like to start, and I'm very bullish. You look behind me, 130 years. Anything over 100 years is doing something right. So in our world of water, I mean, here's an organization that I view, and I'm so proud to represent as a former regulator that regulated this industry. I'm very proud of the fact that NAWC is the most aggressive, formidable, pro-water lobbying organization in the United States. And we represent, those companies behind me every day, not only in Washington, but we're engaged in the communities they serve across the U.S. And we work in state capitals and even down to the local municipal level. So, for us as an industry, advocacy, using our collective clout, having a unified voice is very important when you're talking to policymakers and regulators. Now, you asked me a question, you might have thought that I forgot about it, and that is how technology is going to play a significant role in our industry. And I think what's fundamental to our industry is, look, you source it, you treat it, and you distribute it to a tap, right? Well, a lot has changed over the 50 years, actually over the last 130 years. I mean, we're treating water molecules here in the US. 20 years ago, we were treating it at parts per million. Today, we're treating it parts per trillion. As an industry, we deal with over 240,000 main breaks a year here. So we have a lot of aging infrastructure that needs to be replaced. So in the world of artificial intelligence and modeling, you're going to see a kind of a smarter water grid evolve. And that's good. I mean, that's a very good thing for water quality. It helps us address what the US, people don't realize this, but the US has the highest per capita water use in the world, right?
No.
And groundwater, which is so precious, and the US has dealt, and it's not just Texas or California or the Southwest. Many parts of the US are dealing in scarcity. In fact, over the next 15 years, something like 40 US states are going to face some type of water scarcity issue. And that's alarming. That's gaining a lot of headlines in states and governors that are addressing these issues. But groundwater in the US is being depleted 25% faster than it's being replenished. So we need to think differently about how we treat, detect, and source water here in the US. And technology, to me, is going to play a key role in that.
Yeah, well, I agree. I didn't know those stats they're quite so alarming. Definitely makes you pause for thought where you run the tap when you're brushing your teeth and taking an extra long shower in the morning. But
and by the way, think about this in the context of it's a highly regulated industry. We addressed earlier the fragmentation problem, but it's highly regulated, right, on the health side and on the economic regulation side of it, how you set rates and deliver a tariff to a customer to pay for it. And what we're finding in the US is, the reality is here that, we can deliver water at a penny a gallon. But yet here in the US, Americans and across the world, we gravitate towards bottled water. And it's just a misnomer when you think about, the way we go about our business of being stewards of public health. And we are the only public utility service consumers ingest. So there's no room for error. There's no room for cutting corners on operational maintenance and spending. It's critically important because, again, this is the only public utility service consumers ingest. And if we don't do it right, we've learned some very horrific lessons here in the US about, when you have those, what I call generational failures in the system, the impact that has on communities like Flint, Michigan, Jackson, Mississippi, Baltimore, Maryland. These are all communities that have come under very stressful times because of a water system failure.
Yeah, I think on a scale of 51,000 drinking providers and systems in place, the tiny, consistent wear and tear over time, many decisions that are made by people individually over time really add up and create issues that kind of get kicked down the road by patch fixing and spot fixing. And so from a field perspective, one of the key things that we're focusing on driving is that retention of knowledge and circulation of skills and the ability to do more with less people. Not because we want people to be removed from the industry, quite the opposite. We want more people to come to the industry by providing water companies with innovative technology. But what we're finding, and perhaps you can touch on this, is that people aren't attracted to the industry right now. So how are the leaders that you're speaking to as part of your NAWC work addressing this issue?
Yeah, this is a very big issue. The human capital side of what we do. This is from the field work of those incredible line service personnel that are out there every day representing their companies, doing it safely. But yet there's so many different career paths within this industry. And what we're finding in the world of post-COVID is obviously the workplace has changed a little bit, And, there is a phenomenon known as the silver tsunami that's facing the entire U.S. utility sector. That's electric, gas, water, wastewater. And so we as a trade association are spending a lot of time. In fact, we've just embarked on a industry-wide study with Bluefield Research, which is one of the preeminent research firms here based in the U.S. in the Boston metro area. And we are working with Bluefield to put together a comprehensive approach towards how do we make the water industry, I call it sexy again. Let's talk about our business education partnership, the best practices out there, how we work with trade schools to bring workers into the field. It's a very mission-driven enterprise, right? Water quality, sourcing water, resiliency. I mean, it's so mission critical. So this is an industry that provides an entry-level person like an unbelievable pathway, a journey to work in a very stable environment. As I sit here today, the stock market's down, 20%? So
I haven't checked.
I try not to check either. But the utility industry, especially the water industry, it's a place where companies invest in their employees. They drive a safety culture. It's a nurturing where they promote leadership development. And that's really important to what we do as water providers across the U.S.
Yeah. And I guess we can come back around to the legislation aspect of it now, because that was a big part of the topic I wanted to discuss today. And I guess with all of that in mind, facing the challenges of attracting and retaining talent, the silver tsunami, which presumably means silver hair and not a wealth of money. And
I'm getting it here.
Yeah, well, I found a few myself. My wife was very pains to point out that I'm getting some gray hairs. How do you see legislators and lobbyists coming together to either ensure that new technologies, AI, and so on, are both fit for purpose, but also can be sped through without being sat in, a melting pot of waiting for everything to happen?
Yeah. Well, look, I'm be the first one to tell you that AI is going to revolutionize utility service here in the US, and I would say globally. It's going to, as you mentioned earlier, it's definitely check the box, improved efficiencies, right?
Mm-hmm.
Reducing waste, enhancing service reliability. These are the holy grails to what a utility provides service to a customer. So we talked earlier, like leak detection prevention and how AI powered sensors and predictive analytics can help detect leaks before you have a main break. Pretty novel concept, but having that ability to have that type of asset optimization is a cost savings to the utility, right? Predictive maintenance, another on O&M cost, and how AI can predict when equipment, pumps, valves, treatment plants are likely to fail. I mean, how valuable is that to an operating engineer? And that this helps minimize downtime and extends the lifespan of that infrastructure, right? Water quality monitoring. I mean, this is so important to our industry. And imagine AI-driven sensors that can help monitor water quality and deal with things like pH levels, turbidity, chlorine levels, and detect contamination real time. This is where we're headed. The way we source, distribute, and transmit water molecules across the U.S. is going to change because of the AI revolution. I'm a firm believer in that. And I think we as an industry, utilities are very risk adverse, right? They are the last bastions of adopting technology. I can tell you that as a recovering regulator. And there's a reason for that. Utilities don't risk the balance sheet of the company on something they don't understand or they haven't put a beta field test towards. And so in our industry, as we get more comfortable with AI, we as an industry will be leaning in, as we've done very successfully on leak detection. This is going to be this is going to have a profound impact. And I say profound, I mean in a good way for our industry.
Yeah, I completely agree, Rob. And I have a lot of conversations, not as many as you, with the leaders of some of the companies on the wall behind you. And the one thing that they're all talking about is investment in infrastructure and investment in people. And that's part of why I'm so excited to be on the journey with Field, because we really, really focus on the people who are delivering the work. I've been to countless offices of utility leaders now in the US, and pretty much all of them have some kind of dedication statue or plaque or photograph of their field teams. So I'm really excited about the adoption of technologies both in the system. I think that's going to change the game, but we've got to get those technologies into the system in the first place, and that's going to be the hard work of the men and women who brave the front lines, they brave the weather, they brave the main breaks. I actually saw a video on YouTube recently of a main break in Fort Worth that destroyed a woman's house, and someone's got to go there and clean up the human cost of that. So I guess in terms of,
and by the way, the good news, if there is a silver lining to that, as I know there's a lot of hysteria around AI and how it's going to displace workers, there still is that human touch to your example there, where field service rep will be engaging with that customer during that event. That's never going to change, right? Trenching and laying a water main or a pipe, setting a meter set, you're not going to do that with robotics. You need the human side of, the human side of that to accomplish that.
Absolutely. And I think definitely our mission is to eliminate from the field workers' day the stuff that they don't need to be doing, the stuff that isn't adding value to the bottom line of the company, but not only that, but is distracting away from the things that they enjoy doing. I think I've met probably around 400 field workers in my time at Field, and I don't think I've met a single one who has really got out of bed in the morning to fill in a piece of paperwork or complete, a pollution event form. So if we can develop technologies to help them focus on the things that they love, I would love to only focus on the things that I enjoy doing about my job, which is things like this. But instead, I send a lot of emails, which I don't particularly love.
The good news is Field is really driving that change in the utility sector here in the US and in Europe and other parts of the world. And that's commendable. I mean, that's why we enjoy our partnership with you.
Yeah, thanks, Rob. And absolutely looking forward to our next event, which I think is going to be down in Florida in the NAWC National Summit, where we're a partner, and we'll be doing some conversations around AI and maybe some breakout sessions there too. So really excited to bring that to your members and I guess our partners, as well as we're a partner in the NAWC. So when you're speaking to the leaders, we've touched on the silver tsunami, we've touched on main breaks. Where does treatment and looking at getting involved with PFAS rank in the conversation for things that they're talking about?
Yeah, I mean, look, this is, and it's, by the way, I just read an article, it's amazing that the US is ahead of Europe when it comes to PFAS regulation, right? The European Union has now come out with their solution to eradicating and treating and disposing of PFAS in the water systems. So the U.S. is obviously, the historic regulation that has come out of the Biden era EPA is one that is going to set forth a pathway where, something like, according to Black & Veatch, a very reputable engineering firm, something like $47 billion of investment is going to be needed to treat and detect and dispose of these emerging contaminants, PFAS, PFOA. So for us, our member companies, I mean, these are long horizon investments that need to be made, right? And by the way, while you're making these investments, you have to be very strategic in the technologies you're going to use. So, activated carbon, ionized exchange, and who knows what the next level of technology is out there. But we're trying to do it in a cost-effective way, because all of this, Daniel, as you know, all of this comes at an impact to customers. And so what we've done as an industry, and I'm very proud of our efforts, our general counsel, April Ballou, who led our effort to sue the polluters that caused this problem. Here we are as passive receivers of these emerging contaminants, and now we're being potentially sued. We're going to be held liable, which is beyond my, call it the Powelson common sense test, that a passive receiver that treats and detects it in their system and disposes of it to protect customers, consumers, and communities. And then we can be sued for a problem we didn't even cause. So we're spending a lot of time working in a unified coalition with groups like AWWA, NAWC. These are all the big water groups in Washington, rural water, to make sure that policymakers understand the ramifications of these regulations. We have been very straightforward in saying polluters should be held accountable. We have to be held exempt from the disposal of these emerging contaminants. So Congress, I think, is going to, gravitate towards bipartisan legislation to address that issue. I certainly can tell you they had the aha moment when my little ramble there about how we could be sued for something we didn't cause. And I think they understand that. And then obviously leveraging the bipartisan infrastructure monies that President Biden and the Congress set aside in a bipartisan measure. There's about $12 billion of PFAS remediation dollars for us to access. And all that is encapsulated in trying to shield customers from cost impacts to comply with the regulation. These regulations, presidents come and go, right? Congresses come and go. Rulemakings, obviously by impact of law and the courts, do not. And they can be appealed. But I think if I had my crystal ball and the boardroom table today, I'm here to tell you, whether we can argue over 4 PPT or 10 PPT, the reality is we are investing now for what the EPA has told us, and that is treating at 4 parts per trillion here in the US for PFAS.
Yeah, that's a staggering degree of water finality. And I dread to think how many trillion particles of water are in just a normal glass of tap water. But I think you've made a really valid point around the polluters bearing the brunt of this kind of cost. But right now, there's $43 billion of infrastructure to be built. What I hear in terms of positives, and again, we've talked about silver linings already and silver tsunamis, but silver linings are, if you're listening to this and you are inclined to go and work at one of these utility companies in the water industry, there's plenty of work to be done there. And it sounds to me, and I know from being in the industry, on the fringes, that there's a lot of cool technology and exciting opportunities there. So I guess, do you have a message for someone who is looking at the utility industry, maybe doesn't know much beyond turning on and off the faucet? Where do you see the industry navigating over the next sort of 5 years? Not necessarily in a specific sense, but in a broader, more ethereal sense. What are you planning for the next 5 years?
A great question. And I start with the fact that, as I said earlier, we're very mission driven as an industry sector. So I think every day we continue to provide safe, reliable drinking water service. We engage with those communities we serve. And then we continue to, what I've often used this quote, do the boring good. What is the boring good for our industry? That's investing in sustainable water infrastructure investment. That's looking out over the horizon. And by the way, Mother Nature has taught us many lessons about resiliency and investing around flooding events, wildfires, earthquakes, you name it. We need to invest and build more reliable, resilient water infrastructure. That's flood wall plans, that's storm erosion, and start preparing for that. And I'm very proud of the fact our California members, but here on the East Coast, our East Coast members, this is really a dominant theme right now, is that whole resiliency investment. And then obviously, we talked about emerging contaminants, that investment that needs to take place. And it's not an investment we're going to delay. We're making bets now. We're making strategic investments around the right technologies so that communities have peace of mind that when they turn on that tap, it's treated and they're not going to have to worry about issues. Now, I will tell you this, if I had to, going on that lookout, what's on the horizon, I think microplastics are coming to the EU, they're coming to Washington, and many environmental leaders are going to have to deal with, I think, unfortunately, another example of what happens with bottled water when we don't recycle properly. So microplastics are an issue that are going to, heat up here in the next 5 to 10 years.
Yeah, I think I share that view. And if I may, there's a couple of things that I think we'll start to see is more sustainable green infrastructure with water at the heart in developing cities. So I think we'll see more green buildings with the ability to treat water and collect rainwater and treat it at source to reduce the spans of, that it needs to be distributed. I think that's a big challenge particularly out in the states out west, where they've got to transport water from, a long way essentially,
Yeah.
and they don't have much rainfall. But when they do, how do we capture that? How do we treat it and get it to the people quickly?
And let me share with you an
Please.
alarming statistic here in the U.S. and my friends at Veolia, who really have done some incredible thought leadership on this topic. If I took you to Israel, Australia, New Zealand, Indonesia, Singapore, so you heard me say earlier, our appetite here in the U.S. we love to use water, we love to take long showers. We really haven't had, particularly on the East Coast, conservation calls on, water police knocking on your door saying you can't use that. That's a problem, by the way, in the U.S. water grid. Like, the customers don't have what we'll call real-time price signals, and usage, and how to deal with consumption and conservation. That's coming, by the way, and I think AI is going to drive it. But here's the other point. We don't reuse water well here in the U.S. Less than 1% of our water is reused here in the U.S., where I set up Israel, where that equation is like 90%, coupled with desalination to deal with water scarcity, water security in the case of Israel. So the U.S. is woefully behind the world when it comes to water reuse strategies, and we've got to figure this out. We're too, as consumers of this great, precious resource, this finite resource, we've got to figure this out and do a better job with looking at water reuse strategies.
Yeah, I think, say what you like about the US, but there's a nation there that rises to opportunity, and they've only 1% is used. I see that as an opportunity to reuse 99%, and someone will monetize that and make that, a very, very effective industry. I've no doubt. Whether they do that in the next 5 years or not, I'm not sure. But I think one of the things we're seeing, Rob, and again, your friends and colleagues might be having these conversations as well, and it'd be great to hear if they are. How's transparency and evidencing of things that are, done? So investments are made. I know that in part of the rate cases, there's got to be a mountain of evidence applied. And I can see a lot of use for real-time data capture, using AI to link up with other systems and creating a conjoined approach to rate case. But how do you see transparency, and capture of evidence really affecting your industry over the next 5 years?
Oh, I think it's another key trend that's going to, we're already having conversations with, just by way of background, an average rate case proceeding for an electric or gas or water company can range anywhere from $500,000 all the way above $1 million, right?
Wow. Is that just in preparing the case, Rob? Sorry.
Yeah, that is in preparation of the case. That is legal fees, expert witnesses, settlement discussions, the whole engagement piece of a rate case, right? Imagine being able to use artificial intelligence and knowledge-based learning sets to capture some of that without having to pay for professional services. Now, I don't want to cause an earthquake to the utility bar here in the US, but I guarantee you the technology's coming where companies can use these type of models to develop a rate case and gather what's the holy grail. It's important empirical data that you can gather as part of your evidentiary record and establish that by not having to hire professionals to track it down.
Yeah.
And that to itself will lead to an efficiency in how a rate case is put together. Another outcome, I think it's a positive for our industry, and the tools are there. They're emerging. And I guarantee you, utilities, gas, electric, water, wastewater will be using them more effectively.
Yeah, I think that's really insightful. I didn't quite know the scale of the cost of putting together a rate case. And I think this probably can bring us round towards the end of our conversation, Rob, because I know you're a busy gentleman. But how do we stop this flow of money, investment money, that could be used otherwise to deliver safer, cleaner water? It could be used to develop the careers and the livelihoods of professionals. How do we stop this money flowing away from being in the ground, to put a bit of a crude point on it, because that's where the bulk of the utility value for money is driven. How do you see that, and what do you think we can do to leverage technology to improve the return on investments for customers, for shareholders, and for stakeholders as well?
Well, I'm a big advocate for value engineering, right? How do you
Oh,
value engineer a system, whether it's a water grid, an electric grid, a transportation grid? Like Uber figured it out, right? Not everybody, no disrespect to my good friend in London, and I love London cabs, but Uber came along
well, they
and
cost a lot of money, Rob.
yes, and they revolutionized the way we engage to get around a metropolitan area or a suburban area, you name it. Well, those same concepts apply to our water grid. Look, we have a lot of unaccounted for water flowing through pipes all over the country. That unaccounted for water, you know what that is? That's
Yeah.
called AKA leaky pipes. So, we talked earlier about this scarcity dilemma that's facing every state in some way. And we're going to have to get really deathly focused on using these technologies to replace those leaky pipes, right? We learned a valuable lesson, by the way, in the gas industry. Leaky pipes, we know what happens when a gas explosion hits. It's horrific. Ours is probably not going to cause loss of life, but it's going to have a property impact to a homeowner or a business, and a business interruption. So this is an example of artificial intelligence kind of changing the way we look at asset optimization of the water grid. That's from meter sets to pipes to how we address the movement of those molecules along the grid. So I think, as I said earlier, I'm very bullish on how technology is going to change the way we engage with our customers.
Yeah, I'm excited. And I think all of this is ultimately for the customer. It's for the person who is on the receiving end, because like the UK, we don't have a choice as to who our water provider is. So we have to hope that they are doing the boring good. And I think every utility should get that emblazoned on their trucks, on their buildings, on their vans, doing the boring good. I think that's a really great turn of phrase, Rob. I guess in closing, I'd love to know, for the next guest on the Water Webinar series, what question about the water industry would you like to have answered?
Wow, that's as us Americans say, the $64,000 question. But let's start with, look, the path to the future is never quite clear, right? But I think my question would be, what does the global water grid look like, and is it a sustainable model for future generations? It's a lot to unpack in that, but I think we need to be looking at generation equity. And as we talked about in my earlier point of the 51,000 systems, the U.S. does not need 51,000 drinking water systems. It's not a sustainable model. And so that would be my Cambridge, or here in the U.S., my Wharton Business School question of the day for your next guest.
I have a really good friend who's just been admitted to Kellogg, so I'll change it to the Kellogg question.
Kellogg, another premier business school. So all good.
Yeah, thank you, Rob, and we'll make sure that we get that answered, because I think one of the goals of these webinars is not only to speak to industry leaders like you, but it's to generate a conversation and hopefully shine some new perspectives. I've definitely learned a lot from this conversation. Is there any final celebratory note that you'd like to go out on 130 years? I hope FYLD gets to 130 years old. We're 5, I think, this year. So how do you run in such a successful organization? Final thoughts from you, Rob?
Well, it's like your company and your founders and my interaction with you and your team members. You have to have a high impact team, right? We got to be agile, nimble. We have to cover many different bases. And so teamwork, and I've been blessed here at NAWC and in my prior life, we have a great professional staff, but over my shoulder, we have companies that every day doing the boring good, investing, addressing reliability, affordability. Our member companies are really the North Star for safety and engagement in their communities, and making sure that customers and communities know that they are getting drinking water service that meets and exceeds state and federal drinking water standards. I'm very proud of that. And That's what gets me up every morning, although it's a dreadful commute here into Philadelphia. Although I'm a big rail proponent. I love my rail commute in on SEPTA. It's not the
underground.
It's not the underground, but that's so important to it. That mission carries into what we do in the team here at NAWC. So, as my father once said, there's no I in team, and those words ring true in everything we do. We work together as an industry, we collaborate, we problem solve, we information share, and that's for the betterment of what we do as water utilities here in the US. And that's a great ethos to follow every day.
Great. Thanks, Rob. It's been an absolute pleasure for your time. Thank you for coming on. Thank you for speaking to me and engaging so positively with FYLD. I look forward to being over there in Philadelphia soon, and definitely looking forward to some sunshine in Florida at the National Summit later this year.
Well, Daniel, thank you for the opportunity to join you here today. It's truly an honor. So thank you.
Great. Thanks, Rob. Take care.